Good evening all and welcome. Tonight's video has been graciously sponsored by Hunt a Killer. This is an amazing, engaging and addictive subscription box service where you get to be a detective. There's been a murder and it's up to you and your team to solve it. This involves sifting through piles of documents, evidence, audio recordings and case files, eliminating suspects as you go along until you crack the case and catch the killer. It's a fully immersive experience with a very high attention to detail that makes it all the more fun and that feels oh so real. It's definitely the kind of game you can play with your partner, friends or family and would be the ideal thing to do over Thanksgiving. My wife and I have been subscribed for a while now and are absolutely addicted to solving the mysteries. I can honestly say it's been the funnest thing we've had to do during COVID, and we're itching to receive the next part of our mystery. I'm sure that once you've played it, you will be too. So follow the link in the description, punch in the code MORTIS to get a discount on your first box. You won't regret it. But for now, it's time to get comfortable and let the darkness take control. I used to drive for Papa John's, and I have several stories I wish to share. One day I ended up with this delivery on the evening shift, and it was after the dinner rush as far as I can recall. So things were quieter, and not as many people were out and about or on the roads. The customer lived kind of deep in this rundown neighborhood, full of single-story houses, and when I arrived, literally every single light in the house was off. I walked up to the door, figuring that I might as well ring the doorbell since they ordered it. After all, they were waiting for me, right? So I ring. Nothing. I waited a bit, ring again, but there was nothing. At this point I figure they aren't there or perhaps they're asleep. So I walk away from the door and was about to call my boss to relay that I might have to bring the pizza back, when almost silently, the front door opens up. It's so dark inside, it's like a scene from a horror movie, where you can't see anything at all. Two pale, stringy-looking people come out the darkness without saying much at all, paying cash for the pizza, and then take it, and quietly retreat back into the darkness without ever turning on the lights. I left pretty quickly as it freaked me out. Was I in danger? I doubt it. But those guys were pretty creepy. On another occasion, I had to deliver to this really terribly run-down extended stay motel that I always hated going to because it was literally the most dangerous place we delivered to. It was very late, around 10 p.m. or midnight. I get out of my car, got the pizza from the trunk, and as I begin walking across the parking lot to the guy's room, I see that down at the far end of the parking lot are a very large crowd of people. From what I could tell, they looked like a gang or just a lot of rough people hanging around. I became nervous. After I gave the guy his pizza, I took my empty pizza bags and was walking back when I looked left, and they were all walking towards my direction. Keep in mind, this is a crowd of 30 plus people, and not a single one of them were walking anywhere else. I very quickly cranked the car and got out of there before I had a chance to figure out what was going on, or if it was me they were coming for specifically. Finally, I delivered to this old guy in the same rundown neighborhood as the first story. I had been to his house before, and his deranged-looking son was the one who usually answered the door, but this time I got Pops, and I'll never forget it. He opened the door shirtless, and I was immediately greeted with what looked like a surgical scar. Not too bad, right? It was infested with what looked like warts or skin growth. I don't mean a few either. It was absolutely covered in them, to such a point where I can't think about it without getting sick. They were pale looking, but the color of rotted snot. It reminded me of the way sea life latches onto other creatures and grows. It was pretty scarring. He paid in cash, and I left as quickly as I could. I remember immediately hitting the hand sanitizer in my car and practically bathing in it. Other than those, I've had a few weirdos, but nothing seriously creepy. There was a guy we delivered to whose nickname was Captain Underpants because he always answered the door in his undies. Gross, but nothing that would mess you up. We also had this massive, sprawling apartment complex that we often had to deliver to, and all the drivers hated it. It had multiple apartment buildings with the same numbers, so it was awful to navigate through, but otherwise new and rather nice. One day I got this delivery to a guy way in the back of the complex called Mr. White. I make my way back there, and as I climb up the stairs I hear this muffled sound coming from his room. I knock, and Mr. White opens the door looking like Mr. Rogers. He had a sweater and everything, but as he's paying for the pizza I keep hearing muffled gags, sounding like female screams coming from his apartment. And it did not sound like the TV. It sounded like a person. But the guy just kept on smiling as he paid, acting like nothing was wrong, and not even trying to explain it away as the TV or anything. He was chill as ice. He finished paying, took the pizza, and I walked back down, kind of wigging out over what I just heard. I couldn't be sure it was someone, but I hated to do nothing, and someone die because of it. I called my boss on the way back, and he advised me to call the police immediately. So I did. They took my name, but I never heard anything about what happened or if the guy was actually doing anything to someone in there. But regardless, it freaked me out. Either I called the cops on an innocent customer, or I saved someone from a psychopath. I still think about that night, from time to time. I'm a 22-year-old female and used to do DoorDash on the side for some extra cash. This was in the summer of 2018, when it was a little bit newer, at least in my town. Since then, I think they've made a lot of changes, but at the time it was a little unorganized. If you don't know what DoorDash is, it's like a food delivery service, typically for restaurants that don't deliver. Think McDonald's. Anyway, the one night I was doing deliveries all day, I decided to do my last delivery at around 10. So I get an order in and the person wants a medium-sized cheese and pepperoni pizza and loaded potato wedges from a pizzeria nearby. I was kind of wondering why they'd ordered from a pizzeria that delivers, but I figured it's because the place was notorious for taking forever when you order for delivery. I accepted the order and headed to said pizzeria. I got there and picked up the pizza, confirmed on the app that I had picked everything up, and was on my way. The app notified me of the special instructions on the customer's form, which asked for me to call them when I was outside. Okay then, nothing unusual there. Lots of people ask that so that they can come out to get it from me. I get to their address, and it's in downtown. It's a larger apartment building, and it's completely pitch black. I instantly get an eerie feeling. So I pull to the curb, stay in the car. Hell no was I about to go near that building, and call the number. Luckily, DoorDash has this thing that hides your actual phone number. It rings a few times, and then this creepy woman's voice comes on the line and says, "We can't get to the phone right now. We're a little tied up," and then creepily giggles. Meanwhile, the entire time in the background, there's another woman screaming, and I mean screaming for help and for her life. It even got louder, as if the creepy woman was purposefully putting the screaming woman on the phone. I instantly hung up and drove off really quick, not even acknowledging which direction to go to. Luckily, there was a super popular restaurant a few blocks away, and I pulled into that parking lot and pulled up the app. I was worried about getting in trouble for not being able to deliver the order, so I contacted DoorDash Help Center and they told me I had to wait 15 minutes to see if they'd call me or message me about their food. Well, they never did. I'm sitting there in the parking lot of the restaurant telling my mum about it, and we agree it's probably just a prank, and just in case it isn't, I should call the police. So I call the non-emergency number and tell them anything. The police tell me they're going to do a wellness check and actually thanked me for calling them to tell them about it. I went home and nothing ever came of it, but I still think about it from time to time. I did get a free pizza and potato wedges, so I thought that was cool. I really hope it was, or some kind of harmless prank. About 30 years ago, I used to work for a pizzeria in the small town in which I live. It's the kind of place where you know pretty much everyone who you bump into on your route, who you're delivering to. Anyway, we were understaffed that day. I was also answering the phones while I was waiting for my replacement, as technically I was the delivery driver. This wasn't an uncommon thing I had to do, as we were always incredibly understaffed. It was an independent, low-budget pizzeria, and the guy was stingy as hell when it came to working. I get this call, and it's an old lady. We hadn't heard from her in absolutely ages, I'd say at least a year. But she sometimes ordered pizzas, Hawaiian. So we get the order. However, there's something weird about this phone call. She doesn't say hello or anything like she usually would. When the phone answers, she's just saying she'd like a Hawaiian pizza, and then hangs up the phone. She didn't even say where to. Again, small town. I guess she either assumed we knew who she was and where she lived. Well, I think that's the only reason, really. In any case, we know who she is. She's on our system. We double check, make the pizza, and about 20 minutes later, when my replacement arrives, I can finally start making my way. This old lady lived a bit out in the sticks. It's a small town, so the sticks aren't exactly far, and after 10 minutes do I reach a little rural cottage, out in the middle of basically nowhere. All the lights were off when I first approached the house, which gave me a very weird vibe and made me feel quite unsettled. I grabbed my flashlight and peeked out and flashed it towards the door, seeing if there was a paper note or anything saying she'd be right back, but there was no such thing. I hesitantly stepped out, grabbed the pizza from the back seat, and started making my way towards the door. I knocked a few times on the door and waited, tapping my feet, expecting her to answer the door any moment now, keeping in mind her age and the fact she might be delayed. I remember it was cold, as I was standing out there, the only warmth coming from the pizza on top of my hands. I waited for about 2 to 3 minutes, growing ever more bored. That's when I decided to knock again. I knocked firmly and said, "Hello, it's the pizza." I waited 2 more minutes. I was starting to get annoyed. So I started looking around the house to see if perhaps she hadn't heard me or was in another room. I looked with my flashlight just to double check. This was starting to get weird. Just at the point where I thought perhaps I should go back, did it strike me that I should go round the house and check the garden or something. Perhaps in some bizarre turn of events, she walked outside and got locked out. There wasn't a gate or anything, so, being sort of hesitant still, I opted to walk around and just double check. For her safety too. I reached the back of her house and she's got these big glass windows that are basically the size of a door that look out into her garden. Just as I turn on my flashlight to look inside, do I see a sight I'll never forget. The woman is lying on the floor. I panic. I freak out. I grab my phone and start dialing, trying to get in contact with my manager. Only then does it hit me that if something's happened to her, I really should be calling the authorities, so quickly hang up and dial an ambulance. From there, it was a whole thing with EMTs and the police, and to cut a long story short, it turned out she'd been dead a while. At least a few days by their reckoning. It was very cold in the house, and winter, so at least her body hadn't entered a big state of decay. But the real question on my mind was, how could a dead body order a pizza? There was no one in the house, the police confirmed it, and I was physically there when they went in and broke the door down. It was a very uncomfortable situation. Obviously the pizza went cold, and me and the police and the EMTs ended up eating it. But even so, it's one of these things in life that I really can't explain. We didn't record our calls, but I remember receiving it, writing down the order, and the whole process, like it was just yesterday. And it really gets me thinking. Does anyone have an explanation for how this came to be? Maybe she just wanted one last pizza before she crossed over. Guess I'll never know. I used to deliver pizzas for a pizzeria in Cape Town, South Africa, when I was in university to make extra cash. I used to deliver to the same house quite often. Incidentally, this place was quite close to where I lived at the time. There was nothing overtly strange about this place, except that whoever would receive the pizzas would normally take quite a long time to come to the door, and would always ask me to pass them pizza through the security gate instead of unlocking it and making it easier for everyone involved. One quiet night a call comes through for this house, and I collect the pizzas and get to the house reasonably quickly. This time a lady who I'd never seen before is at the house. She opens the door and lets me in. It's not entirely uncommon to be let into a customer's house, so I don't think anything of it. She points me towards the kitchen, which is down quite a long corridor, and asks me to drop the pizzas off there. She follows me all the way, still nothing weird. The passage opened up to an open-plan dining room and lounge area. Through this area is the kitchen through a door on the left. As I was passing through the dining room/lounge area, I saw something that sticks with me to this day. An old-looking dentist chair, with a person lying in it. Whether the person was alive or not, I still don't know. He had a sheet covering his whole body, except the very top of his head and his feet, which were duct-taped together. I couldn't tell if he was breathing or not. The lady that opened the door was still right behind me. She said absolutely nothing. We went into the kitchen and she paid me for the pizzas. At this point, I was either expecting to be attacked by this lady, or someone else hiding somewhere, or to be scared by the guy under the sheet as some part of a practical joke. Not wanting to give anything away, I didn't say anything, and prepared myself to either defend myself or not be frightened should it be a joke. I walk out towards the front door, double-checking to see what I saw was correct and not just my imagination. The lady, still behind me all the way, closed the door behind me as I left, and said nothing. To this day, I still have no idea what was happening in that house. It could have just been some joke, but I really don't think it was. The presence of a dentist's chair still makes no sense, and I didn't see anything else that would suggest the residents of the house collected weird paraphernalia. I drive past that house quite often, and still wonder if I was in any real danger. A few days ago, I ordered a delivery service via an app called Rappi that works in South America, where I live. And to be able to get the delivery, you obviously have to give the details like your cell phone number and house address. When I received the delivery, the guy started flirting with me and began asking me weird questions. I told him I was only 16, hoping that he would leave me alone, but he just tried to keep making conversation. But I told him to have a good day and shut the door. Fast forward to yesterday in the afternoon. Someone called my house phone number. Keep in mind that I don't give out that information in my app, and my mum picked up the phone and the man told her that he wanted to talk to me. calling me by name. She asked who he was, and he told her he was one of my school friends. My mum gave me the phone, and the man told me who he was and gave me his name, which later turned out to be fake, and said I was very hot and that he wanted to meet up with me. I immediately hung up the phone. I started looking through the Rappi app and see if there was some way to report this guy, but I couldn't find anything. Then I tried to search in the delivery history and couldn't find anyone with the name he told me. I'm really creeped out right now because I don't know how he found out my house phone number, and he also knows exactly where I live. It's a pretty tricky situation. I just hope he never tries to reach out to me again. The story I'm about to share with you happened a very long time ago. I didn't come from the most affluent family, but they were still generally nice people. The one thing I lacked deeply, however, was a rooted self-confidence. I was never a very attractive girl, the kind that would often get mocked. In any case, this led to some poor life choices later down the line, and that is where the story truly begins. I started hanging out with the ne'er-do-wells at my school, a guy called Brad in particular. I thought he was different, and that he saw me for who I truly was, and not just a slab of meat, like some other guys see girls. However, Brad had certain vices, but nonetheless, I was infatuated, and I wanted to be with him. Reflecting on it now, I'm unsure if he was just with me out of convenience, but we'll get there eventually. We were 16, turning 17. Brad had pretty much free reign of his house. He lived with his mother, who was hardly ever home, and as a wayward 16-year-old boy, started taking narcotics. One of the things he invited me to do was to go live round his house, and after a particularly nasty argument with my parents, I decided I was leaving. I packed my bags and left to live with him. I dropped out of school, and we didn't have any money. His mum would be gone at least 3 weeks, and the little she had left him for groceries was pretty much depleted. But there was one asset in my life that I could use, my car. So I put it to good use and got a job with a friend at a local pizza joint and started working as a delivery driver. All the money that I earned was pretty much blown on Brad's drug habits. He'd often invite him and his friends over on payday, buy a heap load of stuff, and blow all our money in one hit. I often had to hide some of my money sometimes just so that we could afford to buy groceries. I soon realized that my life was miserable, and after about 2 months of this, I was getting tired of being treated like dirt and realized I wasn't as valued as I thought I was. I started debating leaving Brad and going home, and telling my parents how I decided to leave school. All things that really scared me, but not as much as what's about to happen to me. It was a regular night. Like I said from explaining my situation, we really needed money. So I was working until the very last shift at the hope of getting a decent tip to really make ends meet this week. I had my aim at $5 more in my tip jar, and then I could go home satisfied. This was the final order of the night. Our pizza joint closed at midnight, and it was about 11:40 when the order came in. So once the pizza was successfully loaded in the back of my car, was I ready to head out and head home right after the delivery. I start making my way. It was a fairly rough area, but unavoidable. We often got deliveries to deliver to this part specifically, so I'm on my way. I'm about 5 minutes from the delivery address when I quickly pull over to consult the sheet of paper where it was written down. I drive for another 5 minutes, and when I'm pretty sure I'm at the address, I'm scanning each and every house, checking the numbers. It was something like 32. I was passing 26, 28, and when I finally get up to 32, the house looks vacant. I start getting a bit creeped out. I wonder if I got the right place or not. Bear in mind, this was before the prevality of cell phones, and I didn't have the luxury of owning one. I'd probably have just driven back to the shop if it weren't almost guaranteed to be closed by the time I get back. As it was a small place, my manager expected me to just give him the money during my next shift. It was sort of cool in that regard. I stop outside the house and ponder for a moment, waiting, hoping that someone will just stroll out when they see a random car parked there and knock on the window for their pizza, but no such luck. I do a deep breath, step out, grab the pizza, and start making my way to the dark front door. The streetlights almost seemed to flicker for a moment, like it was out of a movie. I shudder and bang on the door a few times, calling out, "Pizza delivery!" I wait for a minute, but there's no response. Just as I'm about to head back to the car, feeling quite deflated, do I hear shuffling behind the door. That's when it starts creeping open, but no one comes out. I call out again, but I've already made my way down the first few steps. "Hi, I'm here to deliver your pizza." Nothing. I wait a little while longer to see if anyone's gonna come out, and that's when I hear it. What sounds like a scream come from the upstairs part of the house. I look up and don't see anyone. At this point, I think I'm gonna wet my pants, so just as I'm about to run, does the door open fully, and there's a man there in nothing but socks and underpants. He gives me this most horrific looking grin and starts walking towards me. Bear in mind how poor I am. I really wanted to run, but I also wanted that tip desperately. So I stood there as he approached me and grabbed the pizzas with a friendly smile. He said in a very cold voice, "I'll be back in a sec with the money." I thought deep down that perhaps this had just been a misunderstanding. Maybe he was nice underneath it all, I told myself. That's when out of the bushes nearby jumped 3 dudes wearing ski masks. They all started screaming at me to give the money, but I told them I didn't have any money. They started yelling at me and telling me to move it into the house. This had been some kind of setup. Just before I reach the entrance, does one of the guys stop and pull me back? "Brenda?" He removes his mask, lowers it, and I see it's one of the guys that Brad is always hanging out with. His name was Mark. I just about crapped my pants. I asked him what the hell he was doing and why he was doing that, and he tried to explain that he just needed a little cash and thought he'd get a pizza for free, you know? And tried giving me all this spiel. These were the kind of guys my boyfriend, darling boyfriend, was with all the time. One of the guys who was blowing all our funds on all kinds of illegal stuff. I kind of laughed it off, more out of fear than anything. They never paid me for the pizza, but I didn't care. When I got back home, Brad was asleep, passed out from being high, I'm sure. I gathered my stuff and left. Nearly being robbed, or worse, was the wake-up call I needed to realize I needed to get my life together. So I did. I used to be a delivery driver, which doesn't sound very interesting because it isn't. I did have to deliver to some very remote places though. One time I delivered to a trailer park just barely inside our designated delivery zone, and it was very dark and poorly lit. I'm leaving my car running and keep the headlights and inside lights on to go to deliver the pizza. Upon returning to my car, I sat down in the driver's seat and look up to see a creepy old man standing less than 3 feet away from my side of the car. He was just staring. It was the equivalent of a jump scare. I just started driving forward, had to do a U-turn to get out of the park, and when I turned around, the man was standing in the middle of the road. So I freaked out for a second while I sped around him, only to watch him attempt to chase my car out the trailer park. I put in my 2 weeks' notice after that. One night, I had a delivery to a pretty rural area. A lot of my deliveries are to rural areas, so no big deal. But tonight is drizzling and especially dark, so I'm having trouble finding the address of the house I'm looking for. So I roll down the passenger window to use my really bright flashlight, pointing it at mailboxes, trees and posts and anything that anyone might have their address on at the end of their driveway. I'm driving along at 5 miles an hour, pointing my flashlight, when the beam catches a guy wearing a dark hoodie at the end of an obviously long gravel road staring directly at me. More of a glare really, but whatever. He could just be on his phone or something. Anyway, it gets weirder. I finally find the address I'm looking for and pull up into the drive and hop out the car. That's when I get the sinking feeling. No cars, no house lights, boarded up windows. If you've ever been a delivery person, you know that this is the time to get the hell out of there because you are about to be robbed. Right as I'm about to jump in and throw the car in reverse and note the hell out of there, I see a man walking across the empty field adjacent to the property towards me. Crap. Now I'm a pretty burly bearded dude, so I don't worry a whole lot on deliveries, but this scared the hell out of me. When he gets closer, I see him very obviously tucking something into his waistband. What I can only assume was a firearm. He then says in a thick, menacing southern accent, "I thought you was the law." I guess because of how I was scanning the addresses. I meekly point my car topper and the pizza in my hand, and he says in the nicest voice you've ever heard, "Oh great, thank you so much, have a great night," pays me, and proceeds to walk back through the open field in the direction of no buildings in the rain with his pizza. For the rest of my shift, I couldn't stop whispering, "What the hell?" It was the strangest thing that's ever happened to me. The first job I had was at a pizza place in my hometown. It's a really small town with a little over 1,000 people. We were right next to a main highway that's about 30 minutes away from a major city. One night around September to October, I'm working with 2 other co-workers and our manager. The whole shift had been pretty slow, and we were getting ready to close at 9 p.m. Around 8:30, 2 men and a little girl of around 8 come in, and I go up to the front and ask them if they need help with anything, or if they're going to place an order. The shorter one of the 2 men says that they're just passing through. He then asks about the prices of the different items on the menu, and he also asks at which time we close. I answer, and he just says okay, and walks away to sit down with a little girl at a booth. The taller man then leaves the building and gets into the car parked out front. The smaller man gets up about 5 minutes, whispers something to the little girl, then leaves. My co-worker and I are watching all of this go down and talking about how strange it is. The little girl gets up and starts dancing around to the radio station we have playing. After a few minutes of this, I walk up to her and ask her if she's hungry or if she wants a drink. She says she only wants a water, which I get for her, and she takes it back down to the booth and sits down. I ask her who she was waiting on, and she says her dad. My co-worker and I are starting to get worried for her because the 2 men haven't returned yet and it's 8:50. We start to think that neither of them are her father at all, My manager decides to call the police. Our town is too small to have our own police station, so we have to wait for them to come from the next town over, which takes roughly 15 minutes. I go sit with her at the booth and am making small talk with her, trying to make sure she's safe and nothing happens before the cops arrive. In the middle of our conversation, she gets up and says she has to leave. My manager and I are telling her she needs to stay in the restaurant until her dad comes back, but she starts crying and screaming and insists on leaving. A few days later, my manager says the cops found her walking down the road alone late that night. We never heard any more information about that situation afterwards. I just hope she's safe now wherever she is. Back when I delivered pizzas in my small college town, I used to have to deliver to some pretty remote places. One weekend I was delivering to a house which was about a mile outside our delivery range. But it was a slow night, and I was saving up tips for a trip in the summer, so I told my boss I would do it. The house was near impossible to find. It was deep in the woods, dark outside, and the driveway was completely overgrown. There was very little cell service too, so my GPS wasn't functioning properly. I passed it 4 times before seeing a very hidden mailbox which indicated the house. I got out of my car and went to the front door, knocked a few times but there was no answer. It didn't look like there were any lights on in the house, but the window blinds were drawn, so it was hard to tell. I could clearly hear what sounded like someone running up and down the stairs over and over. I thought it might be a dog at first, but there was no barking. After about a few minutes of this, I began to feel something was off and became extremely aware of how dark it was, how quiet it was, and how remote I was right now. I determined this dude's crappy trip wasn't worth the agitation and decided to head back. I went back to my car, screamed, and dropped the pizzas. There was a kid, probably 11 to 12, sitting on the hood of my car. I have no earthly idea where he came from. He had on a light grey hoodie which, combined with the darkness, gave him the look of a spectre. I picked up the pizzas and gathered myself, and yelled out asking if he lived here and ordered the pizzas. The kid immediately jumped off the hood of my car and sprinted into the woods away from the house. I got in the car ready to knock the hell out of there. When I reversed out the driveway right before I pulled into the street, I saw a kid emerge from the woods, again, standing on the driveway, watching me leave. I got back to the store and told my boss what happened. He was angry I didn't make more of an attempt to deliver the pizza, but I talked him into calling the house to confirm the order. No one picked up after 4 attempts. My boss stopped accepting calls outside our delivery zone after that, more so out of not wasting his driver's time than our safety, as this dude was an arse. We never got a call from that house again for the 2 remaining months that I worked there. I work at a multi-billion-dollar retail chain, and besides my main other department, which is also in the back room, there is a second department I'm cross-trained in, that I work in for a few hours every Saturday accepting deliveries. Now, I'm of average build, not overweight, but not as slender as I used to be. I have kids, so I have a bit of a mummy tummy that I fought to get rid of for years. I think I look average, but used to get a lot of attention back in the day from young men. Around when I was in my 20s, I'm now in my mid-30s, and thought I looked a little younger. It's not by as much as it used to be. These days, the only guys eyeing me up are 10 years older than me, and usually unattractive too. I'm married, and I'm not looking for a replacement. I love my husband. There's a good variety of delivery drivers who deliver to my store, and I know many of the regulars by name. Every now and then there's a new driver or a substitute driver for one of the companies, but for the most part, it's the same people. So there's a regular driver who comes in every Saturday to deliver milk. We all call him Mike. He's in his mid-50s and nearing retirement age for the company he works for. He's friendly and cheerful and always greets everyone happily and loves making jokes. He even does the shave and a haircut 2 bits, knock on our bay door when he arrives. I've always thought he was pretty cool, and even said he was my favorite delivery driver since he's so nice. I think he may have gotten the wrong idea though. When I first started there, the other lady who used to substitute in that department warned me that Mike was a terrible flirt and that he liked to try and get with all the ladies. I kind of shrugged it off. I didn't think it was a big deal. Over the past year, he said that I'm his favorite receiving person and that I'm beautiful. He's been very flirty and even asked me out on lunch dates, and I've always declined and told him I was married. This hasn't deterred him in the least. He could care less about that. Mike has gotten friendly enough to show me pictures and videos of trips he's been on and whatnot. Last week he showed me a video of the driveway up his house and views around his 300 acres of land. I thought it was rather odd. I mean, why show someone your driveway and or your land? What was his goal? He started calling me a nickname recently, which no one had ever really called me, as it was something only my creeper dad ever called me. Even my husband knows to steer well clear of the nickname as it triggers me. It's an obvious nickname for my name, but no one uses it, kind of like Mike is a name for Michael or Kate for Caitlin. Well, yesterday, just before he left, he said something I wasn't expecting. Mike asked me if he could shrink wrap me and take me home with him. I gave him a firm but immediate no. This immediately made me think of a murder that happened in my area before I moved out here, where a woman was saran wrapped by her boyfriend and dumped naked, wrapped on the side of a highway. The police were never able to connect the guy to the murder, though the locals knew he had to be the one who did it, and I was told he left the area after that. The more I think of his question, the more creeped out I get. I wonder if I should report it to management, or just tell him to cut the crap out next time I see him as a warning. My company prefers people to tell harassers to stop before reporting an issue. I'm not sure if this falls into that category, or if it's creepy enough to just be something I should report right away. What do you guys think? All I know is I'm really uncomfortable having to see him again next Saturday when he returns. I took my manager aside and told her the situation, and she agreed that it definitely wasn't appropriate, and that she wants a written statement from me on the matter. So we'll see how it's handled. If he stops delivering to my store or stops being creepy, I'll know it's been handled properly. Update. I spoke to my assistant manager on Friday, and she said that it was being handled by ethics, so not at store level. I told her I was thinking of having my supervisor shadow me while the guy was there. Saturday morning came along, and I felt like crap and didn't really want to have to deal with him on top of already feeling tired, so I just called out. Some poor support manager had to deal with him instead. I don't know how long it will take them to address the issue, but I hope it's soon. Update 2. My case is being investigated at store level again. Did the statement and answer questions and whatnot? I won't know anything for a while. Update 3. Today I was anxious and got to work, as I know it's the day the creepy guy delivers milk. The closer it got to 7:30 AM, the more nervous I became. Just before 7:30 AM, I went down to my other work area on the opposite side of the back room. It's a huge store, so that was roughly 600 feet away. When I got there, I discovered that my supervisor wasn't there, as I had feared, and my anxiety only grew. When I got back to my area, there were only a few merchandisers milling about, loading up their products onto carts and whatnot. I didn't see any other managers, including the one I had spoken to earlier in the day, to confirm that he would be present and nearby to give me some sense of security. In a moment of desperation, I thought back to what my co-worker had told me just yesterday, and that was to ask a female co-worker to stay with me and look out for me. So I asked one and she said she would. We waited in the back room, distracting ourselves with meaningless tasks to pass the time. Before I knew it, half an hour went by, and an hour, and then another hour. No milk guy. I went to lunch and thanked my co-worker for humouring me and staying nearby. After lunch, I checked to see if the milk ever came, but it hadn't. I was pretty happy I didn't have to see him for another week at least. Then later I was pulled into the office at the end of my shift. The manager then told me that as of today, Mike is no longer permitted in our store. He can't deliver there or even stop there, so now they have to rearrange our delivery schedule for milk. But I honestly was just so relieved. I told the manager that I felt very relieved and thanked him for letting me know. It was like a weight had finally been lifted off my chest. So, creepy delivery driver that used to deliver to the store, let's never meet again. Hey guys, it's Mort here and thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed tonight's video. I just want to say that honestly, from the bottom of my heart, Hunter Killer is a really, really fun game. Seriously. I recommend it to each and every one of you, and I'm not being paid to say this specific part, by the way. This is legit. I think most of you will seriously enjoy this game. 100%. If you want to get it, obviously I hope you enjoy it, but it is really, really fun. Probably the only annoying part is waiting a month to receive the next box, but it's still really, really cool to do. Anyway, I hope everyone's well. I hope you all had a really cool Thanksgiving weekend and, maybe splurged on Black Friday. Yesterday I almost finished this video. I was recording it. But Pandora woke up. And that's when I realized that I had like 30 minutes to renew my Adobe to get the Black Friday deal, because that's when I buy it. So they then informed me, you can't get the Black Friday deal because you're not you already got it last time, so you can't get it again. And then it was a bit like, well, I need this to work, so fine. And I'd already cancelled my subscription. But then in the end, because I cancelled it and I was like, no, it's too much, I don't want to pay, they lowered the price even lower. And I think it's not cheap, but I think I got it down to about £311 for the year, which, I think is really good. And then, because I complained a little bit more, they gave me 3 months free. So yay, it's really good. It works out roughly about nearly £1 a day, I suppose, to use this software, but it's completely necessary. But that's not complaining. I'm just saying that, if anyone else has Adobe, you can try and contact their chat system, and when you say, oh, the price is too high, they'll give you a lower price. And if you say, oh, the price is still too high, they'll give you an even lower price. That's the point where I took it, but I don't know if you can push them even more. But maybe it will help someone out there. I think I'm going to go now. I don't know if this applies to many people, so I don't want you to just be listening to nothing. Stay awesome, and I'll see you in the next one.